There are so many captivating characters within Bleach, but despite this, Sosuke Aizen effortlessly stands out amongst them. While he is one of the series' main villains, his charm and layered appeal have won over a lot of fans. He was introduced as a respected captain who was beloved by all of the Shinigami, especially his loyal lieutenant Momo Hinamori. The true nature of Aizen shocks everybody when he defects from the Soul Society. Now, Kubo does not overtly reveal Aizen's motives to us, instead we learn about what he wants through several key moments in the story, which we have to piece together in order to understand the driving forces behind Aizen's actions. Now, it's for this reason that a lot of people are confused about Aizen's motives, as they wonder what was he trying to achieve, what was so important that he had to be so cruel to his underlings like Momo, and why was he conducting holification experiments. In this video, I want to break down how Aizen earned the trust of those around him in order to execute his plan. By the end of this video, you're going to have a clear understanding of Aizen's motives, as well as the significance of his final speech at the end of the 1000-Year Blood War arc about courage. So without further delay, let's dive into my video explaining the motives of Aizen and why he is one of the greatest villains in anime and manga. We got really tired of the same old boring anime shirts, so we decided to launch Getsuga.com with the aim of creating designs inspired by our favorite anime and manga. We came up with designs that look cool and represent all of our favorite stories. Check out the latest Instinct collection, which features some amazing designs like this Frosted Heavens design inspired by Toshiro Hitsugaya, or this Instinct design inspired by Holo Ichigo, and my personal favorite, which is the Heart design, which was inspired by Ukiura Shifa. Do not miss out, go to Getsuga.com and wear your favorite stories. Aizen has a unique blend of charisma, intelligence, and deep-seated ambition. All of these attributes had served to mask his ambition of manipulation, leading those around him to trust him within the Gotei 13. Aizen initially presented himself as a calm and respected captain, projecting an air of warmth and humility. It was not difficult for Aizen to gain the trust of his peers and subordinates. The truth behind the facade of Aizen was his desire to control all of reality, ultimately aiming to replace the Soul King and to reshape the world in accordance to his own vision. Aizen's style of manipulation is subtle and calculated, and it's rooted in his understanding of the weaknesses and desires of his chosen target. Unlike typical shonen villains who exert their dominance by insane displays of power, Aizen relies on psychological manipulation, establishing trust through kindness while carefully planting seeds of doubt within the minds of his opponents. His manipulation of others would eventually secure him on his path to power. Early in the story, during the Soul Society arc, when he was playing the role of a captain, he had planted subtle seeds of distrust amongst the Shinigami using small, compassionate conversations in order to manipulate the perceptions and actions of others. For example, when he was speaking with Renji about Rukia's execution, Aizen had expressed concern for her well-being, questioning why was she given such a severe punishment for sharing her powers with a human. This brief conversation was enough to eventually get Renji to spring into action against the Shinigami, as he was acting in accordance with Aizen's deeper hidden motives. The intricacy of Aizen's plans become more apparent as the story unfolds, as you begin to understand how every move that he had made, right from his choice of lieutenant to his outwardly supportive interactions with fellow captains, all of these actions were meticulously planned out in order to achieve his ultimate goal. This reveals a layered personality that Aizen possesses, which combines strategic foresight with a keen awareness of human psychology. Aizen's approach aligns with a Machiavellian archetype where his ambitions overshadow any loyalty, empathy, or moral consideration. The philosophy of Sosuke Aizen is deeply self-centered, as he places his ambitions and plans above the welfare of others. This results in a character whose charisma is as dangerous as his power, as he is able to deceive even those closest to him, like Momo Hinamori, who he arguably had manipulated to the highest degree, as she was completely dependent upon his guidance. Following his betrayal, she had literally become a shell of her former self, not really returning to normal until Shinji Hirako had assumed the position of captain of Squad 5, thus somewhat restoring her faith in humanity, as Shinji demonstrates excellent leadership skills, while also ensuring that the morale of his underlings is boosted, as we see with how he interacts with Momo during the 1000-Year Blood War arc. When Momo was working under Aizen, she was under deep manipulation which had led her to have blind faith in him even after she had witnessed his betrayal firsthand. This is during the Arrancar arc, when Momo appears to speak to Hitsugaya, questioning her childhood friend whether if he is going to kill Aizen, as she pleads with Hitsugaya to save Aizen instead, as she comments on how Aizen may have a good reason for what he is doing, stating that it may be Genichimaru who is responsible for forcing Aizen to behave in the way that he is. Aizen has always held this perception of the world being flawed, and this is why he is so insistent upon his role as the rightful ruler of reality, and this is what drives him to seek a level of power which is unmatched by any other character in the story. His belief in his intellectual and spiritual superiority perfectly reflects his philosophy, which is that he alone is fit to stand on top of the heavens. Unlike Kisuke Urahara, who accepts the status quo, which is maintained by the existence of the Soul King, Aizen contrastingly perceives the Soul King as a powerless figurehead, a linchpin that was created by the Shinigami in order to stagnate reality. Aizen's rejection of the status quo fuels his disdain for the leaders of the Soul Society, who he deems as being responsible for this flawed world. When he had told Urahara that a victor does not ask how the world is, but rather how it should be, this had demonstrated Aizen's desire to reshape all of reality to suit his own ideals. Aizen is a complex character who is both captivating and terrifying. During the Turn Back the Pendulum arc, we learn about events that had unfolded over 100 years before the present timeline. This short backstory reveals Aizen's position as a lieutenant under Shinji Hirako, the then captain of the 5th Division. Even then, Aizen was concealing his ambitions behind a facade of loyalty to Shinji. The Turn Back the Pendulum arc gives us a solid insight into Aizen's cold-blooded nature, and how important holification was to Aizen's plans to overthrow the status quo. Aizen had a desire to transcend the power limits of a Shinigami, and he had done so by conducting holification experiments. These experiments were rooted in his obsession with the Hokyoku, a device that was capable of bridging the gap between a Shinigami and a Hollow. The Hokyoku was developed originally by Kisuke Urahara, and this initial prototype was only able to partially dissolve the barrier between a Shinigami and a Hollow. When Aizen had discovered this, he had embarked upon creating his own Hokyoku, and he had done so by experimenting with the souls of countless residents of Rukongai, and then by experimenting upon the souls of Shinigami, as we see during the Turn Back the Pendulum arc. His aim was to replicate and perfect Urahara's invention. By overcoming this boundary that exists between the Shinigami and Hollow, he had believed that it would bring him closer to a form of existence which had surpassed both races and would have made him a transcendent being. His holification experiments took a dark turn when he had manipulated several high-ranking Shinigami, including his own captain Shinji, as well as other lieutenants and captains, infecting them with holification, which Urahara would later be falsely accused of, thanks to the powers of Aizen's Kyokasuigetsu, which was able to free him of all suspicion, as several Shinigami under hypnosis had testified that at the time of the holification, Aizen was within the Serite. This holification incident was a carefully planned attack on the structure of the Soul Society. Not only did he progress in his research on holification, but he had disrupted the very fabric of the Gotei 13 by framing Urahara, arguably the smartest man within the Gotei 13, leading to the Shinigami who are holified having an execution order placed upon them, including his captain Shinji Hirako, who had already expressed distrust in Aizen, which is partly the reason why he had made Aizen his lieutenant. Aizen's actions led to the exile of Urahara, Yoruichi, and Tessai, along with all of the Vizards, who were all disgraced and forced to live as outcasts within the world of the living due to Aizen's manipulations. Aizen's holification experiments are more than just scientific research. They symbolize the hatred that he has for the stagnant order of the Soul Society, and by conducting these experiments, he expresses his hatred for the status quo, with him introducing both chaos and evolution into a system that he deems to be hypocritical and flawed. Aizen can only overthrow the Soul King once he himself has evolved into a transcendent being, one that is no longer restricted by the limitations imposed by being either a Shinigami or a Hollow. The Turn Back the Pendulum arc is the earliest chronological point of the story that we see Aizen, and as much as I would love to see his backstory before this, like how we had learned about the existence of the Soul King, Kubo has stated that he has no interest in drawing Aizen's backstory, because giving everything away about a villain makes them lose their appeal. On his official fan club Club Outside, Kubo did reveal that Aizen had known about Urahara before Urahara had become friends with Yoruichi, and we know that Urahara and Yoruichi had spent a lot of their childhood together, which means that Aizen was aware of Urahara at a really early point in his life. The most important thing that you need to understand about Aizen's character is his rejection of the Soul King and his desire to become a god. Rather than accepting a world where the Soul King serves as the ruler of reality, Aizen considers the entire structure of the Soul Society and the existence of the Soul King to be deeply flawed and hypocritical. This is more than just a simple rebellion against the Gotei 13, as it represents Aizen's ambition to rise above a system that he views as deceitful. From his perspective, the Soul King is a lifeless, limbless figurehead who symbolizes a hierarchy where control is given to the Soul King who possesses no power himself. The existence of this powerless god is hidden from the Soul Society, with only a select few knowing the true nature of the existence of the Soul King. Aizen believes that the presence of the Soul King reduces the Shinigami into loyal servants of a broken system, blindly following orders, all for the sake of maintaining the balance of souls between the world of the living and the Soul Society, as reality continues to stagnate without evolution. Aizen's goals reflect his belief that the Soul King is not a true god. He deems the Soul King to be a figurehead who exists to uphold a false reality. This is why Aizen wants to transcend the limitations of a Shinigami and a Hollow, as he wants to transcend these limits that have been imposed by the system of the Soul King. Aizen believes that a true god demands mastery over both knowledge and power. This is something that the Soul King lacks. The Soul King was rendered powerless and sealed within a crystalline structure, with him not even being able to speak. I have spoken on the channel about the possible will of the Soul King and how the Soul King may communicate with Squad Zero, but even if the will of the Soul King did exist, it still does not fit the perception of Aizen of how a god should be. The role of the Soul King is to passively sustain the world of the living, Hueco Mundo, and the Soul Society without really leading the inhabitants of these realms. Aizen believes that a real god would actively shape reality. He considers himself to be the rightful ruler of reality, claiming to possess intellect which is unparalleled by anyone within the Gotei 13, and his power being strong enough to defeat any opponent who dares to challenge him. In a broader sense, Aizen perceives that the current hierarchy of the world limits the potential of superior minds, as demonstrated by Kisuke Urahara, who is the foil to Aizen. Urahara is the perfect contrast to Sosuke Aizen. Both of them have similar levels of intellect as well as insight about the nature of reality, but they ended up forming two opposing conclusions based upon all of the information that they had, with Aizen wanting to overthrow the Soul King, while Urahara was comfortable with maintaining the status quo. Aizen represents Nietzsche's ideals of the Overman, which states that greatness is achieved by overcoming societal limitations and seeking self-defined power. Aizen ultimately wanted to overthrow the Soul King in order to become a god who was deserving of ruling over reality. In chapter 421, before Aizen was sealed, he had called out Urahara's acceptance of the Soul King, explaining that he had adopted the logic of a loser. Aizen refuses to be led by those that he deems to be inferior and who are unworthy of their position. Aizen's obsession with this plan had even led him to manipulate the Espada. He treats his underlings as mere tools, demonstrating very little regard for their loyalty, as he isn't upfront about his ambitions with them and he lies to them about their purpose, showing that he values only power and intellect, and he sees the Espada as convenient allies but not his equals. Aizen really does believe that he is the only one who understands the flaws of the Soul Society and its structure, and that his way of correcting these flaws is the valid one, as he had refused to even align with Yhwach during the 1000-year Blood War arc, and this was for two reasons. The first was that he did not want to work under somebody else, and the second was that Aizen's ambitions did not align with Yhwach's, as Yhwach had wanted to kill the Soul King and to transform reality back to its original primordial state. one where the concept of death no longer exists, while Aizen on the other hand had wanted to overthrow reality and to shape it in his own image. Aizen's obsession with becoming a god does highlight some contradictions with his own philosophy, because his path of attaining godhood is riddled with murder, deception, and all of the qualities that you would not typically associate with a good leader. While he criticizes the Soul King for being a powerless god who holds no substance, he seeks to replace the Soul King and to exert rule over reality, which is deeply rooted in pride and intellectual elitism. Aizen believes that his knowledge, willpower, as well as his immense power is enough to achieve godliness, but he refuses to understand how his violent actions and brutal manipulation of others is the complete opposite of conventional godliness. Bleach derives heavy inspiration from concepts found within Shinto Buddhism. In Shinto Faith, godly deities are referred to as kami. These deities represent the interconnected energy of the universe, as they aim to maintain a harmonious, balanced existence. Aizen contrastingly isolates himself, placing his ideals above all others and viewing himself as the only one who is worthy of ultimate power. His hatred for the balance and harmonious existence that is maintained by the Soul King is in direct opposition of the Shinto ideals of godliness, which emphasizes the importance of interconnectedness amongst all beings. In Shinto Faith, life is also considered to be very sacred, and the gods are associated with ensuring the preservation and continuation of life. This again is in contrast to the god complex that Aizen has, which is driven by a need to control others, as he disrespects the nature of life by conducting his holification experiments, which essentially seek to surpass the limits that have been placed upon mortals. By disrupting that barrier that exists between a Shinigami and a Hollow, he tries to force his transcendence into becoming a god so that he can skip all of those steps of enlightenment, which would allow a mortal to attain nirvana and to embody true godliness instead of this false sense of god that Aizen has. In Shinto Faith, kami are not absolute and they are not possessive over creation. They do not exist to force mortals into submission. This once again is in contrast to Aizen's vision of a perfect reality, which involves tyrannical rule over all things. Before the series had ended, Aizen's final speech on courage stands out as one of the most revealing moments in his entire character arc. It highlights Aizen reflecting upon his own ideals and his worldview. In chapter 686, Aizen speaks directly on the nature of fear and courage, concepts that have shaped his journey and ultimately contrast with Yhwach's views. Aizen's view on courage is built upon the belief that fear and the awareness of one's own mortality is essential to lead a meaningful life. For Aizen, the drive to overcome obstacles and to challenge his own limitations and to seek out personal growth is rooted in the inherent struggle of human existence, which is the courageous pursuit to progress in one's own life while faced with the prospect of death at every moment. Yhwach envisions a world where fear no longer exists, but Aizen argues that such a world would strip life of its purpose, as people would then lack the motivation to strive for more, to hope, or to even grow. Humans do all of this in spite being afraid of dying, and the name given to the quality that is needed to overcome the fear of death is courage. At the end of the series, Aizen demonstrated that he values the existence of fear and suffering as being key catalysts for self-improvement. Unlike Yhwach, who wants to remove death from reality, Aizen believes that death needs to exist so that humans have the power to continuously evolve in the face of it. In the story, Aizen exhibits a disdain for relying on the powers of others, as he considers it to be a weakness. His power to manipulate, deceive, and maintain control over others reflects his belief that true strength comes from within. This is in contrast to Yhwach, who derives power from his followers, which contrasts Aizen's rejection to depend on others. In Aizen's view, courage is not the absence of fear, but the will to confront fear and to transcend it. This philosophy, expressed in his final words, summarizes the complexity of Aizen's character, an individual who sees himself as both above humanity while also being deeply connected and aware of the most essential struggles that humanity faces. Aizen's speech on courage is one of the best in the entirety of the series, as it offers us a critical insight into the fear of death and why death needs to exist as a means to force humanity to continuously grow and evolve. So hopefully this video has helped you to better understand the motives of Aizen and why he is one of Bleach's most fascinating characters. We have reached the point of the video where I do want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What do you guys think about the motives and ambitions of Aizen? If there's anything that I've forgotten to mention about his character in this video, then let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments. And lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Bleach Explained video. A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.